Alright. So we started now? Okay. So I'll just record also. Godt. Jamen så går vi i gang med
So let's start
samtalen.
now with this interview.
Peter?
Yes.
Inden vi går i gang med selve samtalen, så er der to dokumenter, som tolken vil læse op for dig, som du skal underskrive, hvis du forstår det hele og ønsker at underskrive.
So before we start the actual interview, there are two documents the interpreter will read out to you and translate into English, and you are requested to sign them if you understand and if you can approve.
Okay.
So this is for your information. You've been called for this interview with the Immigration Service because you've applied for asylum in Denmark. The Immigration Service decides whether your application for asylum is processed in Denmark or whether another country should be requested to process your asylum case. And this interview today, the purpose of this interview today is to establish your identity, your travel route, and your motives for applying for asylum. You are obliged to participate in giving the information regarding your asylum case, and this means that you are to give us the information which is necessary for us to consider your application for asylum. You should submit the documents you have or documents you may acquire, and you are also to tell the truth. And if you do not take part in giving the necessary information, this might have a negative impact on your asylum case. If you oppose the clarification of your identity in an active way, it might later on have the consequence that you cannot be granted a permanent residence permit in Denmark. This is, for instance, if you submit false identity documents, or if you submit identity documents belonging to another person, or if you refuse to present your true identity documents, which you, without any difficulties, could or can acquire, or if you give an untrue statement about your name, your date of birth, your place of birth, and your citizenship. When you applied for asylum in Denmark, you were also registered in the Danish Immigration or Aliens Registry, and the representative and interpreter, the representative of the Immigration Service and the interpreter have been imposed confidentiality, and all information you give here will be dealt with confidentially. It is the task of the interpreter to translate the conversation between the two of us, and you are not allowed to speak with the interpreter during the breaks. The representative of the Immigration Service will not write word for word your statement or the contents of this interview. Only the essential points will be written down. The Danish authorities will not approach public authorities of your home country or authorities of the area where you fear persecution during the processing of this case unless you consent to it. Information about your asylum case may be passed on to Danish intelligence services and the Danish prosecution service in Denmark. If this information is important for the intelligence services to do their job, and this is for security reasons. If you have problems understanding the interpreter, you must tell the Immigration Service right away, or as soon as you can during this interview. And I declare hereby that I have understood the above mentioned.
Okay. So I see my name printed. Actually, excuse me. I see a name printed on the paper beforehand, and I'm not signing a sheet of paper with that name on it. And I've explained that before. That's part of what I have to explain as well. But I'm amenable with signing a form that communicates what you articulate, but not with that name on it.
Så jeg kan ikke underskrive det med dit navn på.
Okay, hvad er dit navn?
So what is your name?
Peter Johansen Osisi.
Okay, så det her navn, Peter Frank Womack, har vi fra dit pas, som du udleverede til sagen, World Government passport?
Hvilket? World Government?
World Government of
So-
World Citizens. Det pas, der står...
The passport you
her navn.
submitted, and the name is Frank O.
Peter Frank.
Peter
Womack.
Frank. Peter Frank Womack. This is indicated in the passport you submitted, the World Government World Passport,
Men det er ikke dit navn.
but it is not your name.
That's inaccurate information. That's not the name that's listed on the passport.
Det er ikke det navn, der fremgår på passen.
Jeg har en kopi af passet her.
I have a copy of the passport here.
Sure. Okay.
Hvad er det, der er forkert til?
So, which is not accurate.
Altså, vi mangler dit efternavn.
Is it because your surname is missing?
The surname is listed above the given name.
Okay,
Ja, så efternavnet står foran
okay.
ovenover.
Så kan du gentage dit fulde navn?
So please repeat your full name.
My full name is Peter Frank Womack Johansson OCC.
Okay, godt. Så hvis jeg laver et nyt dokument med det fulde navn, så vil du underskrive det?
So if I make a new document with this full name, will you then sign it?
The full name, I'm amenable to signing it with that, yes.
Ja,
Okay.
hvis du skriver mit fulde navn.
Godt. Jeg laver et nyt.
I'll make a new one.
Vil du måske sende noget i femmeren?
Skal jeg have det kort med, eller?
Nej, jeg har bare printet det ud til. Det kan godt være, at du lige skal sige udskrive på andet papir, hvis den ser mange ressourcer.
Ja, præcis.
Vi laver også en dataændring på sagen, så du får et nyt asylkort, når det er blevet fremstillet.
So we will also change this name within the system, so you will get a new asylum card.
That is appreciated.
Jeg optager det også,
Ja.
vil jeg sige. I'm also recording this interview now. Information.
So when you say you, are you saying you personally? Are
Yes.
recording? Okay, that's fine. I just you recognize when you say I, sometimes you're meaning him, and sometimes you
You're
mean
right.
me. So yeah.
Godt. Fødedato.
So your date of
bekræfte den?
birth? Can you confirm your date of birth, which is?
Okay.
What is your date of
I think I'm uncertain, to be honest, if the date of birth is listed on the World Service Authority passport, but I recognize that for many people the date of birth is just simple information. I can provide to you that I work with 12 calendars, and so if I were to list my date of birth, it would be specific to one calendar, and that would be somewhat a biased representation of myself. And given the fact that my name has been somewhat manipulated already in the communication, I have difficulty lending myself to that type of bias.
Godt, så du ønsker ikke at oplyse
So
en
you do
fødedato?
not wish to give your date of birth?
I can give it in 12 calendars if that's amenable.
Nej, jeg har ikke, jeg ønsker ikke at modtage 12 fødedato.
No, I do not wish to receive 12
That's
dates.
understandable. It's very laborious. That being said, I can give it to you in the good Christian Gregorian calendar. It is the 29th of August, 1974.
Okay.
29. august 74 i forhold til den kristne.
Ja.
So now this has been changed,
Okay.
and this is another declaration here, and it's a declaration of consent. This part is in Danish and this is in English.
Okay.
You want to read it
The
yourself?
same text.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a translation.
Godt.
Ja.
Kan vi ikke lige, hvis vi lige kan gå ud i et minut?
Yes.
Jeg læser.
Ja, men det er hans personfølsomme oplysninger, som er, så den datasikkerhed må han selv stå inden for, men vi kan ikke stå inden for datasikkerhed på en forening. Ja. Velkommen til, når vi er færdige, så kan jeg lave et udklip til dig fra det her.
Yes.
There's an interest in discerning why there's an English translation of this text, but then there's an absence of an English translation of the preceding document.
Ja, så den første side, det er vejledningen, som du netop har fået gennemgået. Den anden side har vi ikke gennemgået endnu, så den behøver du ikke tage stilling til endnu.
So this is just guidance, general information, and this we have not gone through, but this is I'm going by Lisa. This is just for you to read because this is in Danish and then there's a
Sure.
translation. I can read this out if you want.
No, it's fine. I'm illiterate in
Yes,
English. I
yeah,
get
okay.
that, but I'm saying, is it possible to receive an English translation of this text?
Nej, det er det så ikke.
No, unfortunately no.
So, I mean, obviously, you can understand the difficulty in signing a document, particularly having a responsibility in law. That I don't know. You provided the interpretation, but if there's perception of the verbal interpretation of the text being sufficient, then there's the consideration of the verbal affirmation of the text being sufficient as well. But for you to require me to sign it and not provide an English translation of it seems it's somewhat of a double standard
Okay,
of expectation.
Jamen,
I'm comfortable signing it, but I'm just communicating that there's a discrepancy, and then to see that the English translation is provided for this document, and also the solicitation for signing is made here, but then not provided for this. It just seems somewhat of an inconsistency. So I'm comfortable signing both, but I'm just communicating the concern accordingly.
Ja, jeg kan forklare årsagen til, at den samtykkeerklæring er på engelsk. Det er fordi, den bruger vi til, hvis vi skal indhente oplysninger fra andre europæiske lande, og der er fællessproget engelsk.
So I can tell you why the declaration of consent is translated into English, and this is why, in case we need to obtain information from other countries,
Sure.
then the language is in English, and then it is sent along in English.
Men jeg må også sige, jeg synes, at vi skal komme videre til det, vi er her for. Det er at snakke om din asylsag. Så hvis ikke du vil skrive under, så undlad at skrive under. Hvis du vil, så gør jeg det, og så kommer vi videre med at tale om din
But I
asylsag.
think we should carry on now and
Yeah.
talk about why you're here. That is why you apply for
Sure,
asylum.
sure.
If you want to sign, you're welcome. If you don't
I'm
want,
comfortable signing. I'm
Okay.
comfortable signing. I'm just, again, I have a responsibility because if I'm just an ordinary person who's not trained in law, then I have less of an accountability in when I say do a signature. But because I have the training, then I'm held to a higher standard of expectation. Saying people say, well, he has a law degree, he should have known better. So I have to be mindful of like what the causality is. So what I'm gleaning from you is that the first document is essentially an internal document within Denmark, and this one is potentially utilized to communicate to other entities outside of the Danish authority, which is why it's readily available in the English translation.
Correct.
Okay, that's understandable. Again, I'm just extremely honest, and it's painful for myself, and I know it's painful for those who interact with me as well. Thank you for your patience.
Ja, no problem. Godt. Har du nogen spørgsmål, inden vi går i gang med samtalen?
do you have any questions before we start the interview?
I'm without any questions at the moment.
Okay, godt. Hvis du har nogle engelske dokumenter, som du gerne vil have skal tilgå sagen, så tager jeg en kopi og lægger det på sagen. Men jeg synes ikke, at vi skal bruge tid på at læse op af dokumenter, som vi selv kan læse.
So if you have any documents you would like to submit, have included, I'll make copies of these documents today, but we will not spend time reading out these documents.
Sure. That's fine.
For grunden til, at vi er her
The reason why
til en
we are
personlig
here today
samtale,
is a
det er, at vi kan have
personal
en
Is
samtale.
that we are having a conversation.
Very understandable.
Okay, godt. Men jeg starter lige med at
So
stille
I will
nogle
start
spørgsmål til
asking
dine
you
personlige
questions
forhold.
regarding your personal background.
I mentioned I do have just a statement that I would like to make at the beginning, if that's possible. Just this right here.
Jeg synes, den er omfattet af de dokumenter, som jeg nævnte. Hvis du har nogle dokumenter på engelsk, så tager jeg gerne en kopi og lægger på sagen.
So this is included in what I just mentioned. That if
Okay.
you have any documents you would like to submit, I'm happy to make a copy and I'll include it in the file.
Okay.
Og hvis du synes, der er noget, vi ikke har talt om, når jeg har stillet mit sidste spørgsmål, så er du velkommen til at komme med
And
bemærkninger.
if you feel that you have something has been left out once I have asked my last question, then you're most welcome to add whatever you feel.
Would it be possible to read the introductory statement after you complete your questioning?
Det må vi lige tage til den tid,
I'll
tænker jeg.
see about this when we get to that point.
Godt. Så jeg stiller lige nogle
So I'll
spørgsmål
ask you a number of questions
til dine personlige forhold. ikke også?
regarding your
Til at starte
personal
med.
background.
Godt. Hvor er du født henne i
Where were you born
verden?
in the world?
I'm born on Earth. I'm born in the land of Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
within the territory of the native Wyandot Nation.
Okay. Og hvad har du af familie i
And which
USA?
do you have family in the States?
Yes,
Okay, hvem?
Who do you have?
I have a mor, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, cousins, uncles, tantes, nephews, and nieces.
Okay. Godt. Er du gift?
Are you married?
Yes.
Mm. Hvor er din hustru?
Where is your wife?
I am going to abstain from answering questions directly concerning my wife because of concerns of safety.
Okay. Har du børn?
Do you have children?
I am without any children.
Godt. Har du noget familie i Danmark?
Do you have family in Denmark?
Yes.
Mm. Hvem?
Who?
I have cousins.
Mm.
Good to proceed.
Godt. Og hvad er du uddannet som?
And what is your education?
I graduated from Ruffian Montessori School, which is my primary school. I graduated from Cleveland Heights High School, secondary education. I graduated from Hampton University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics. I graduated from Case Western Reserve University, Weatherhead School of Management with an MBA, also completing study abroad program at the University of Manchester Business School. I also graduate from Georgetown University Law Center, completing studies through a study abroad program facilitated by Howard University School of Law at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa.
Okay. Så hvad har du arbejdet med?
So what have you been working with?
What have I been working with?
Ja, altså
What was your
professionelt.
job?
So I am a spiritual diplomat and a spiritual teacher. My expertise is within scriptural reasoning and wealth ethos.
Spirituel.
Diplomat og lærer, underviser.
Okay. Har du altid boet i USA?
So have you always lived in the States?
It's a somewhat of a complex question because it's the presumption of previously living in the area that you refer to as the United States, and that's part of the contentiality of my case. So I am born and raised in Ohio. I leave Ohio and travel to the land of the Cherokee, which is also referred to as Virginia, for my undergraduate studies. After that, I return to Ohio, and then I do a study abroad in Manchester, England. I return from Manchester, England, back to Ohio to complete my studies in business school. Then I go to the Potomac area, often referred to as Washington, D.C. I work there for a year, and then I go to law school there for 4 years. After I graduate from law school, I return back to Ohio. Actually, excuse me. Then I go to South Africa for a study abroad. And then after completing studies in South Africa, I return to the Potomac area, graduate from law school, and then go back to Ohio. And I remain in Ohio until I leave for here, just within the past month.
Okay. Godt. Udover engelsk, taler du så andre sprog?
So other than English, do you speak other languages?
I speak a number of languages. I tell the medical interviewer, the one who facilitates the medical interviews with the Red Cross, that my primary language is silence. And that might seem flippant and kind of smart or hippie-ish or whatever, but that's exactly accurate and relevant because I am mixed heritage. And so I come from people who come from many different languages. English is my primary conventional language. I have some fluency in Français. I have additional literacy within Hebrew, Arabic, Sanskrit, some Mandarin, particularly within my vocation. But silence is the universal language that I speak within prayer, meditation, and additionally. And yeah.
Okay, så jeg har fanget spansk, mandarin, hindu, fransk,
Hebrew, you said Hebrew?
That is correct.
hebraisk. Okay. Godt. Og din religion?
And what is your religion?
I'm Earth.
Okay.
And that's not a flippant response as well. And we can delve into further what that means. But when I say I do scriptural reasoning, I study the Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Digha Nikaya, Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, and Tao Te Ching. Those are from 6 distinct religious traditions. That is my religiosity. It includes additional religiosity as well, including Baha'i, Sikh tradition, native traditions as well. So again, the most simple and accurate term is Earth. In all honesty.
All right. Har du været i militæret i USA?
Did you serve in the military in the States?
No.
Har du været indkaldt?
Were you ever drafted?
Nope.
Okay. Godt. I forhold til helbred, fejler du noget, som du har behov for behandling for?
So as for your state of health, do you suffer from anything which you need treatment for?
Ego.
Ego. Hvad betyder det?
Thank
does
you
that
for the
mean?
smile. Yeah, I think that's what we all suffer from essentially. But physically, no. Mentally, ego. But conventionally, I'm without any ailments that I significantly suffer from. I go to the U.S. District Attorney's Office a few months ago in Ohio, and I'm asked for the first occasion in entering the building whether I experienced any symptoms of an ailment that's widely experienced these days. And they described some of the symptoms of having muscle aches, and additionally, and I said, yeah, I'm getting old. So I don't know if that categorizes as an ailment or just life, but I'm reminded of that conversation as well when you ask the question. And I don't mean to be flippant, but this is how I communicate, and I'm just being honest.
Okay. Godt. I forhold til dokumenter, har du udover det her World Government of World Citizens, har du så nogle ID-dokumenter med?
So other than this document, World Government, World Citizen, do you bring any other documents?
I do have additional documents, yeah. Would you like, I have a stack of documents, so are you
Har-
just referring to just identification documents, or?
Ja, præcis. Ja, nogle
Exactly,
dokumenter, som
identification documents.
de amerikanske myndigheder har udstedt.
Documents that were issued by the American authorities.
By U.S. authorities. Actually, I'm gonna say no. I don't have a document.
Okay.
Well, and also I have to have qualified the question because the World Service Authority passport wasn't issued by the U.S. authority either.
Nej. Okay. Så da du rejste til Europa, hvilket dokument rejste du der på?
So when you traveled to Europe, which document were you using?
When I traveled to Europe, okay. So, when I first endeavored to travel to Denmark a few months ago, I travel on a World Service Authority passport. I'm denied passage. I have an airline ticket reservation and additionally, but I'm denied with a boarding pass because the passport is not accepted. So, because of the essential coercion of being excluded, the permissibility of leaving the United States without a U.S. Credential, I acquire a U.S. passport for that purpose. I'm not a U.S. citizen, and so the passport is acquired through tenuous circumstances. When I utilize that passport to travel. When I arrive in Denmark, I immediately go to the U.S. Embassy and I return the passport to the U.S. Embassy and communicate the fact that I am not a U.S. citizen.
Okay. Og hvornår havde du fået udstedt det pas, som du afleverede tilbage til
So
ambassaden?
this passport you returned to the embassy. When was that issued?
It is issued a few months ago, immediately before my travel here, so about 2 months ago.
Okay. Så vil det sige, at de amerikanske myndigheder anser dig som værende amerikansk statsborger, men det gør du ikke selv?
So does this mean that the American authorities, the U.S. authorities, consider you an American citizen, whereas you do not yourself consider American citizen?
You can inquire to the United States government what their perception is of my citizenship. I can provide to you that I am not a U.S. citizen.
Okay. Og hvad er årsagen til, at du ikke er det, når du har fået udstedt et amerikansk pas?
And what is the reason for this, since you had a passport issued by the U.S. authorities?
Because of the persecution that I experienced from the United States. I mentioned before my graduating from law school. I refused taking the U.S. bar because the U.S. Constitution is classist, racist, and genocidal. I cite Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 of the U.S. Constitution, commonly referred to as the Three-Fifths Compromise, that essentially establishes a 4-tier caste system within U.S. society and within U.S. legal jurisprudence. And it's for that reason that I abstained from practicing law. It is also for that reason that I renounced my U.S. citizenship over 20 years ago. I should qualify that, over a decade ago.
Godt. De gange du rejste til England og Sydafrika, er du så også rejst på amerikansk pas, som du har fået udstedt?
So the times when you went to the UK and South Africa, did you also use the passport which was issued by the US authorities?
That is during the period of my education, my formal education, and that is before I officially renounced this U.S. citizenship.
Okay. Så du har frasagt dig dit amerikanske statsborgerskab?
So you renounced your American citizenship.
That is correct.
Okay. Har du nogle dokumenter på det?
Do you have documents showing this?
I do. I have it available, but not immediately available. I can forward that.
Hvornår har du frasagt
When did you
dit
renounce
amerikanske
your
statsborgerskab?
American citizenship?
I renounced it in, I think the year is 2004, thereabouts.
Okay. Når de amerikanske myndigheder udsteder et amerikansk pas til dig i 2022, vil det så sige, at de ikke har accepteret, at du har frasagt dig dit
So now
amerikanske
that the
statsborgerskab?
American authorities issued a passport to you in 2022, does this mean that they do not accept you having renounced your citizenship?
Again, I mean, if you ask me what the opinions of the U.S. government, I'm not a U.S. government authority, so I'm precluded from speaking definitively or authoritatively about what the U.S. government is considering. I can only communicate where I'm coming from.
Okay. Vil du give mig ret i, at der er en formodning for, at de amerikanske myndigheder ikke har anerkendt, at du har frasagt dig dit amerikanske statsborgerskab, eftersom de har udstillet pas til dig i 2022?
Can you agree with me that you can assume that they have not accepted you having renounced your citizenship since they issued you a passport?
Well, me agreeing with that is somewhat, again, complex because it presumes some type of legitimacy within the U.S. government in itself, and so I abstain from providing that type of formal acknowledgement. I can provide that the United States is an occupying entity on native land, and it is an egregious political compact that facilitates a significant amount of harm for many different types of people. And so to perceive it as a legitimate governing authority is rather problematic for the entirety of the earth. I love all Americans too. I love all people of the United States.
Godt. Hvornår rejste du ind i Danmark?
When did you enter Denmark?
The end of February, beginning of March. It was about, like I said before, about a month ago.
Okay. Og hvor har du boet henne, indtil du søgte om asyl?
And where did you live until you applied for asylum?
So initially, because I'm unvaccinated and I'm informed that the Danish policy is to self-isolate for a period of 10 days upon arrival, I traveled to live with a friend in the northern part of Denmark, near Frederikshavn. And so I stay there for approximately 2 weeks. And then from that residence, I traveled directly to København, which is when I returned the U.S. passport to the U.S. Embassy. And I subsequently thereby immediately go to the police station by the train station in København to begin the process of asylum seeking. And from there, that was approximately 3 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago on Wednesday, tomorrow, mañana. So since then, I was transported here 3 weeks ago, and I'm here today.
Okay.
So it's about 5 weeks all together.
Godt.
Here being Sandholm Asylum Center.
Har du opholdstilladelse uden for USA?
Do you have a residence permit outside the States?
With any other nation in general,
Yes.
I'm without any other resident permit formally.
Godt. Så mener du, at du er statsløs?
So do you say that you're, or do you feel that you're stateless?
I very much have a state. It's the Earth.
Okay.
The recognition of the Earth governing authority is still very much nascent. However, I'm very much a citizen of the Earth.
Okay.
For the purposes in conventional, and I don't mean to be flippant again. I'm not. I know that's where my ego comes in again. I don't mean to be flippant or smart aleck, but I have to be affirmational of my statehood with the Earth. But in terms of conventional perspective of belonging to a member of being a citizen of a member of the United Nations, I am without citizenship of any nation that's belonging to the United Nations. Because I know that's a legal term in international law concerning people who are defined as stateless. So I can qualify within that category.
Nej, forstået.
Okay, I understand.
Godt. Og så vil jeg gerne spørge lidt ind til, hvorfor du søger om asyl i Danmark, og hvorfor du mener, at du ikke kan vende tilbage til USA.
So now I would like to ask you questions about your why you want to apply for asylum in Denmark and why you believe you cannot return to the States.
Okay. So just go.
Ja, jeg tænker, det er jo altid rart med dialog, så hvis vi kan måske snakke sammen, og det ikke bliver en mange minutters monolog, så foretrækker jeg på den måde.
So I would prefer to have a dialogue with
Sure.
you. So if we can avoid having a monologue
Sure.
of several minutes, but
Okay.
having a dialogue between the two of us.
So I mentioned before that I am mixed heritage. My ancestors come from many different lands of the earth. I can be specific: Israel, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, Muskoki land, which is the southern part of the area often referred to as the United States, Celtic land, Ireland, Sverige, Denmark, India as well. And so that's who I am, and that's where I come from. My grandfather, my morfar, is born and raised in Denmark. And so that is particularly why I am here in Denmark, because of my immediate connection with Denmark and my lineage and heritage from Denmark. So that being said, in terms of my experience of persecution of why I'm seeking asylum, it's appropriate for me to first say I'm seeking asylum not just from the United States, but also from medical science. And so I can provide an explanation of what that means and why that is. In terms of my narrative, I can begin in the middle, which is when I graduate from law school. A few months after I graduated from law school, as I mentioned, I refused taking the U.S. bar. And during that period, circumstances, this is 20 years ago. During that period, circumstances are very contentious. This is right after the 11th of September. There's a lot of hysteria within society, and there's a very binary experience within society. Either you're with us or you're against us. And me being refusing taking the bar was perceived as being somewhat of against society. That's not what I proclaim, but that's how I'm perceived. And there were concerns about myself. So, long story short, I was locked in a psych ward. And the police agents communicated having a court order of forcefully detaining me within a psych ward. I was taken to first I was in my childhood home where I grew up. The police arrived in my living room, and I don't fight back, but I didn't cooperate. So the police wrestled me to the ground, handcuffed me, and forcibly took me to the emergency room of a medical institution, a hospital. And the medical staff wanted to have urine samples, and additionally, I refused cooperating then. So then I was strapped to a gurney, and then my clothes were cut off of me, so I was naked in front of everybody in front of me. There was a catheter that was forcefully inserted within the hole of my penis to forcefully withdraw urine from my body. I was forcibly drugged with a sedative, and I eventually lose consciousness. When I awake, I find myself in a psych ward gown and still strapped to a gurney, but in a unit of a psych ward. And from there, I was subjected to continuing interrogation from psychiatrists, and additionally, there was the demand of me taking psychiatric medicine. There had not been any interview to me before that point. There was no criminal charge against me for any crime or anything else. But there was just the insistence of me agreeing to take the psychiatric drugs that were opposed. I refused, and so I was forcefully drugged with the psychiatric medicine, and that continued on for the period of approximately a month on a daily basis. The orderlies and security every day would enter into my locked unit, force me to the ground, and forcefully drug me. And eventually, after that period, it becomes I start to it's difficult to resist in that for that duration. So eventually, I am released under coercive terms and returned to my domicile. And so that was the first instance of me experiencing the abduction, the unlawful detainment, and the effect of torture. There were in the next 20 years, it happens about a dozen occasions, about between 10 and 12 occasions, periodically through the next 20 years, and with varying levels of, or differing levels of severity and methodologies of affliction and essential torture. And I can explain why it's torture, legitimately. And so that's why I'm here seeking asylum.
Okay. Hvad er årsagen til, at du er blevet tvangsmæssigt indlagt og medicineret?
So what's the reason why you have been hospitalized forcibly?
Okay.
And forced to take psychiatric medication?
So again, first of all, it's not hospitalization, and we have to be very careful about the terms we utilize, because hospitalization is when somebody is being treated voluntarily for a medical condition. And what happens to me was not a hospitalization.
Okay, hvad skal jeg
It
kalde
was
det?
a forced
So what
detainment.
am I to call it then?
A forced detainment.
Ja, tvangsmæssigt indlagt på en psykiatrisk hospital. Er det forkert?
So forced to be hospitalized forcibly in a psychiatric ward. Is that wrong?
The word hospital is I have very much respect for healing in the word hospital. And so again, what's done to me, and it's not just done to me, but what's done to other people in that respect, is not hospitalization.
Psykiatrisk afdeling.
So being forced into a psychiatric ward.
Okay, so I appreciate that, and I don't mean to be like very difficult or whatever, but I'm very mindful. I'm honoring this process as well, so I'm being very careful of the words that we utilize. So the reason for that, I can provide my rationale. If you're looking for the reason that was told to me, again, it's dishonest, and so I have difficulty just reciting the rationale in that respect. I can provide that effectively. I am perceived as a political dissident, and so rather than locking me up or other things that draw into question the actions of the government, the methodology of forcibly detaining somebody within a psychiatric ward is a way of imposing stigmatization and discrediting any claims that such a person makes. And this is something that's historically done within civilizations across the world, from China, the Middle East, into the United States. So when somebody is called crazy, it's a matter of discounting anything that person says. And one of the things, painful lessons that I learned in this process is that there's no proving being not crazy, because when one responds with anger or hostility to that, then everything that person does is utilized as a rationalization for the accusation.
Okay, godt. Hvad var det, myndighederne ville fjerne din troværdighed i nogle udtalelser, nogle handlinger? Hvad var det for en udtalelse af handlinger, som de ville fjerne troværdigheden fra?
So the authorities wanted to remove your trustworthiness in some statements and some actions. What were these statements?
Okay. The fact that I don't take the U.S. bar is intrinsically if I use the word threat, that sounds that's a very strong word, and I'm trying to think of another word that's similar to describe, but it significantly undermines the order and the nature of authority espoused or desired by the United States government, and as a preemptive way of minimizing that effect. It's a matter of just putting somebody in a psych ward and calling into doubt, into stigmatization, anything that the person says. This is also something that's...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hvorfor så?
Just carry on.
This is also something that's done, I've observed in the 20 years for a number of reasons. In the United States, there are legal principles like habeas corpus and due process. These are very fundamental legal rights that a person has. And I just say this: the psych ward process circumnavigates those requirements. Due process is not required for locking somebody up, and there's the rights of habeas corpus are also excluded in the process of locking somebody up in a psych ward. And so it's another methodology of behavioral control without the same oversight and accountability.
Godt. Så bare lige så jeg forstår.
So that I understand.
Det som myndighederne ikke brød sig om, var det, at du ikke ville uddanne dig til advokat?
So was what the authorities disliked about you was that you did not want to qualify as a lawyer.
Er det korrekt forstået?
Is that correct?
Okay. I have to again. The questions about what the other people are experiencing, I'm trying to be again just honest. It's difficult for me to speak categorically or definitively what the other people's interests are. So I have to qualify my responses to the question accordingly.
Jeg synes det er fair nok, at du siger, min formodning, jeg formoder, at myndighederne de kom med en skinbegrundelse. Jeg formoder, at deres rigtige begrundelse var det og det. Det synes jeg er fair nok. Det forbehold, det er blevet taget. Så du kan bare fortælle, hvad du formoder var årsagen, den rigtige årsag.
So I assume it's I think it's fair that you assume that the authorities made or gave some grounds that were not real, but that you do know their real grounds.
Okay.
But that a reservation has already been made for that, so you can just say what the real grounds are.
Ja, det er måske klart formuleret.
Ja.
Dine formodninger. Dine formodninger for myndighedernes adfærd. Hvad er
So
det?
what do you assume? Altså hvilken grund de har til opførsel?
Hvorfor bliver han så tvangsindlagt?
So what
Hvad bryder myndighederne sig ikke om?
So why is that, according to you, why is it that the authorities entered you or forcibly into a hospital, placed you in a hospital forcibly?
Yeah. Okay. I'll say two things. One, it's beneficial to like, I don't know if it's too personal a question to ask, but you seem a little bit younger than myself, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, but it's just a frame of reference. So I'm estimating perhaps you're maybe around 30 years older, or maybe maybe early 30s. And I just say that as a frame of reference.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. I just say this frame of reference because so that means 20 years ago, you may be around 12 in additionally, and so I'm saying that just to like revisit like the conditions at that point 20 years ago. In the United States, I was in Washington D.C. when it happened, when the 11th of September happened, and there was massive hysteria, and so whenever there's that type of fear, there's a very strong binary. There's a circling of the wagons. People are fearing for their lives. People who are not accustomed to fearing for their lives, and there's this very, very strong binary. You're either with us or against us. There's no thinking about it. There's either you're with us or you're against us. And I was not with the what was happening.
Okay, I understand. Men kan jeg så bede dig om at komme med nogle konkrete eksempler på, hvad du nægtede at tage del i?
So can you give me specific examples of what you refused to take part in?
Okay, so then that kind of goes to the second part of what I'm describing, because I'll share with you a little bit of like a metaphor and analogy. It's actually applicable to this, but I'll give you the metaphor of like gang culture within the United States. Oh yeah.
Jamen, jeg synes måske, vi kan tage metaforerne efterfølgende. Lige nu spørger jeg dig, hvad er det konkret, du ikke ville tage del i, som var årsagen til, at myndighederne var efter dig?
So we can take the metaphors afterwards, but
Okay.
I want to know exactly what you did not want to take part in and
Yeah.
which caused the authorities to be after you.
This is part of the difficulty of my task. You are a government authority, and so part of me articulating what the problem is, or the challenges, I should say, is articulating something intrinsically within the nature of governance itself, and so it might be difficult to articulate that communicate that in an effective way. So that's the reason why I utilize a metaphor. So I don't have to use a metaphor. I can just provide that me getting a law degree. I have a certain amount of standing and credibility. People say, "Oh, he has a certain amount of authority," and so if I have that amount of authority and credibility from a prestigious law school, and I'm also not being part of the system, I'm doing something different. That intrinsically undermines the system. So when you ask me what did I refuse to do, I refused in practicing law. I refused in upholding the U.S. bar. Now, I wasn't an activist going out and saying I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But just the very fact that I'm not practicing law is a significant precedent that undermines the authority of the law itself and everything about the law. And so that's essentially the what I refuse doing. And so when I articulate that, it might seem very abstract and comparatively benign and non-threatening. But when we understand the nature of authority and the nature of someone who's conferred with authority, not playing the game, it's a significant intrinsic undermining of that.
Okay, og hvad var det, du ikke ville være med til?
And what did you not want to take part in?
Okay. Perhaps you can provide an example of an action that you're thinking of in terms of not taking part in. Are saying that I'm trying to like understand, or I'm trying to like think of how to respond to that question in an effective way, beyond what I've already said. And so, can you provide an example of like what might have been an activity that you are thinking of, or if you can just give me an example of what you're thinking.
Jeg tror, det var dine formuleringer at tage del i, hvis ikke jeg husker forkert.
So I think these were how you formulated it, taking part in.
Det kan være, jeg husker forkert. Det er helt rigtigt spørgsmål. Var det ikke dig, der
were you not the one putting the words like that?
Okay. All right. I mean, my basic response to that question is me not participating within the system. And I know that's a very generic response. And so I'm trying to think of I'm trying to consider how to articulate that with greater specificity and tangibility to satisfy whatever it is that you're thinking of in terms of an example of what type of activity. It may be perceived as this, and this might be a way of describing it. If someone joins a group and rises to the ranks of the group, let's say I'm delving into another metaphor, but I'll just say a corporation, and learns like the secrets of like how the corporation does what it does. Then the person doesn't want to be part of the corporation any further. Then that corporation might perceive that person as a threat because now they have knowledge about how the corporation operates, where they get their products from, how they distribute, and everything else. And so for the person not to be part of the corporation may likely perceive that person as a threat of starting their own corporation or doing something to undermine the operations, the established operations of the corporation. And so even just being a competitive threat. And so in that, I don't know if that helps in terms of my articulating, but not participating within government in the system when conferred with authority to do that. Like if somebody is trained to be a police officer and then decides that they're not going to be a police officer, that might be something that's similar to it. But this is at the level of lawyer.
Okay, godt. Udover de her 10-12 tvangsindlæggelser og tvangsmedicinering, har du så været udsat for overgreb fra de amerikanske myndigheders side af?
So, other than these 10 to 12 times when you were taken to hospital forcibly and forced to take
I have to say it's not a hospital because
psychiatric ward.
Ja.
Where you were taken to psychiatric ward forcibly and forced to take drugs. Have you had any other infringement or abuse on the part of the authorities?
Continual. So the detainments and the torture, the abductions, detainments, and torture itself are acute incidences, but these are utilized again as a behavioral control, as a way of maintaining subjugation and obedience on the part of the subject, and so even when those actions are absent, when I'm in a domicile and not being subjected immediately to that type of persecution, there's always the continuing threat of that persecution. And then upon being in a residential domicile, there are requirements of continually checking in, and additionally as a form of compliance and subjugation. And so even outside of the immediate abductions, detainments, and torture, there is a continual threat of those things at any point being imposed, living under the conditions of that threat. When in 2004 there was a court hearing where effectively and formally my legal rights were usurped. There was a quote unquote legal guardianship placed over me, whereby that essentially fast tracked the what's referred to as the pink slip process of forcibly detaining me in a psych ward. And so the preceding criteria was actually made effectively redundant or unnecessary, and a court order could be issued without even the very faint pretenses that were initially done. And so in addition to that, I was precluded from making other legal actions within the purview of the United States. For example, I go to actually legally change my name, and I was refused that process because of the status of being held under a legal guardianship. So again, it's a methodology of behavioral control and continually reducing even the civil rights that an individual is entitled.
Okay, hvem er din værge?
Who is your guardian?
I don't have a guardian.
Hvornår blev det afsluttet?
So when was that terminated, that guardianship?
Okay, again, we're going into the words, because when you say who is my guardian, that's presuming me having a guardian. That's presuming legitimacy within the process, and there's no legitimacy in the process. So, which is why I say I have no guardian. The person who is identified in that position is actually my mother.
Okay, men du er
However, it's also communicated to me that is susceptible to change, and it can be conferred to any other individual.
Okay.
Per the decision of the court of jurisdiction.
Okay. Er det tid til, vi holder en pause?
So I think we should have a break.
Okay.
10 minutters tid.
10 minutes break.
Okay.
Godt. Velkommen til at lade dokumenterne ligge, hvis du ønsker det.
Yeah, well, I would like to do something whilst I'm taking a break.
Okay.
So I'll stop recording now and then return it again when I come back.
Ja. igen, du må gerne tage computeren med dig, Vendor.
So you can take the computer with you.